In this lecture you'll learn about the button component. The button component can be used for actions in forms, modals and more. The button styles can be used with both regular buttons and links and comes in different sizes and colors. Here's an overview of the button component. First we see the default styling using all the common Bootstrap colors. We have the primary, secondary, success, danger, warning, info, light and dark colors. Then we see an example where we style a button as a link. And then we see an example of how we can use these default button styles applied to different elements. So here we have a link and 3 different kinds of inputs. Then we have the outline style of our buttons, the same colors as we saw up here, just with the outline style. Then we have different sizing of button components, small, default and large. And then we can see different ways on how we can make this button take up the full width of the parent element so it becomes a block button. We can do this in different ways and with multiple buttons as well. And we can also make it responsive. So right now these are default buttons, but if we decrease the width of our browser window, we can see that they are in fact block buttons initially. We'll take a closer look at that when we get there. Then here we see how we can set different states, not active and active, and also the disabled states for a button and a link. Finally, we have the button plugin we can use to create toggle buttons and toggle links. Notice that this is not active and this is active. When I click it, this becomes deactivated. When I click the first one, it becomes activated. So we'll take a closer look at that as well when we get to it. So let's get started in our code editor. We'll start by creating a simple button component by using the button tag with the type button and the class btn and btn primary. We'll give it the text primary. Then we'll copy and paste this several times and update these values here to secondary and then success. Then we have danger, then warning, then we have info, we have light, and paste in one more, dark. Let me just edit these letters to be capital letters, like so. Now we can take a look in the browser. We'll select the screencast tab over here, and here we see the different colors with the button component. Now let's see how we create the link style. To do this, we have the button, the type button, and the classes btn and btn link. Add the text link, save, go back and refresh. Now it looks like a link even though we used the button element. Now let's see how we can apply default button styles to anchor tags and input elements. So first let's create a link or an anchor tag, like so, with the classes btn and btn primary. We'll give it the role with value button, since we want this to act as a button. We can also use these button classes for regular links if we want to style regular links as buttons, and in that case we don't need the role attribute. Now let's create 3 different kinds of input buttons. So the first will have the type button, the class btn success. I forgot the btn class as well, which is the base class. The value will be input for this first one. Let's copy and paste this, change the value to submit type, and the color here to btn danger, and the value to submit. Paste it in one more time, change the type to reset, the color class to btn warning, and the value to reset. Let's save this, go back and refresh. You will see our link and our 3 different input elements styled as buttons. Now let's see how we can create outline style of these buttons. So let's copy and paste all of these buttons from our first example, and then we'll select this modifier class here and add the word outline, so it becomes btn-outline- and then the color name. We'll save this, go back and refresh, and here we see the outline style. It will get the background color when we hover on top of the button. Now let's see how we can create different sizes of our button. Let's create a button, the type button, and the class is btn secondary. Give it the text default. Now to create a small variation of this, we'll add the class btn sm, and I'll update the text to small. And to create a large variation, we add the class btn lg, and I'll edit the text to large. Let's save, go back and refresh, and here we see it. Next up, we'll take a look at how to create block level buttons in some different ways. First, we'll create a full width block button using sizing utility. First, we'll add a button with the type button and the classes btn and btn secondary. Then we'll also add the W100 to make this have the size of 100% to take up the full width of the parent element. Before we preview this in the browser, let's create the other 3 examples. We can also create a full width button using a display utility. So let's copy this code from up here, and first let's get rid of this sizing utility here. Now instead we want to wrap this in a parent element with the class dGrid, so it will display, the display value will be grid instead of block. This will automatically make it take up the full available width of the parent element. Let's copy this code up here, paste it in, and now we want to control the width of our button using some more classes here in the parent element. So we'll add the call 6 to make it take up half of the width. The total is 12 columns, remember that. And then we add the MX auto to set the margin to the right and left with the auto value. Let's see these 3 examples now in the browser. We have the full width with the class W100 directly on the button. Then we have another full width block button with the dGrid on the parent element. And then we have this column width button with the dGrid on the parent element and the call 6 class and MX auto class to center it. Now let's see how we can create multiple block buttons. We'll copy this example up here, since we are going to use the dGrid again. Now we'll add the class gap2 to specify the gap in between these children elements, and I'll copy and paste this code here. We can also do this responsibly, so let's copy and paste this block here, and we'll keep these 2 classes, and then we'll say dlg block. So initially this will have the grid display value, and it will take up the full width of the parent element. Then for large breakpoint and up, it will turn into a block level element and just have its default width, so not 100% anymore. Now let's save this, refresh. You see the multiple block buttons with the gap, and if we decrease the width, we see that those 2 here are similar until we reach the large breakpoint, which we will reach right there. We see that it turns back into a block level element. Next up, let's take a look at states. Scroll a bit down here. First we have the active state. We'll add the button, the type button, classes btn and btn primary. Then we'll add the text not active. Let's copy and paste this, and now we simply add the class active. We'll edit the text as well to be active. So this is how you can specify the active state. We can also have disabled states. To do this, we don't add a class, but the disabled attribute on the button element. We'll add the text disabled button. We can also do this for links. Style as a button, so let's try to do this. We'll create this link here with the values btn, or the classes btn and btn secondary. And here we must give it the class disabled instead of the attribute disabled. Then we'll also add the tab index -1 to remove it from the tab order. So you cannot tab to it with the keyboard. We'll add the role button, which we saw before previously. And we'll also add the area disabled attribute with the value true. And then we add the text disabled link. Like so. We'll save this, go back into the browser and refresh. And here we see the active, the not active and the active state and the disabled states of the button and the link. Finally, we're going to take a look at how to use the button plugin to create toggle buttons and toggle links. First, we'll take a look at the toggle buttons. We have the button with the type button, the classes btn and btn primary, and then we add the data bs toggle attribute with the value button, and the autocomplete with the value off. Then we add the text not active. Now let's copy and paste this code here and add the class active. Then we'll edit the text to be active, and we'll also add the area pressed attribute with the value true. So this will automatically be toggled by Bootstrap, but we need to provide it initially on page load if we want this to appear active. Then we also have the disabled version. Let me just copy this first example here, like so. We'll add the disabled attribute here and edit the text to be disabled. Let's take a look at this in the browser. Here we see it, the not active one, we can click it and it becomes active. And the active one, which we can click and it becomes deactivated, and the disabled one. Let's see how we create toggle links instead. We'll add this anchor tag here. The classes btn and btn primary, the role button, and now the data bs toggle attribute with the value button, which we also used before. Then the text not active. Copy paste this. Then we add the class active and the area pressed attribute with the value true, and we edit the text to be active, like so. And then finally we create our disabled link here. So we must add the disabled as a class and not as an attribute. Then we have the disabled text here. Now let's save, go back and refresh. We can see here we can click this to activate it and click this to deactivate it, and we cannot click the last one. So this was how you can use the button component.